what will end up being the biggest wrestling story of the year, and maybe in many years, depending on what the end result of all of this turns out to be, first broke on Wednesday, when the Wall Street Journal posted a bombshell report that the WWE Board of Directors is investigating a secret $3 million settlement that Vince McMahon agreed to pay to a departing employee with whom he allegedly had an affair. The January 2022 separation agreement bars the now former employee who was hired as a paralegal in 2019 from discussing her relationship with Mr. McMahon or disparaging him. And the board's investigation, which started back in April, has unearthed other, older non-disclosure agreements involving claims by former female WWE employees of misconduct by Mr. McMahon and one of his top executives, John Laurinaitis, the head of talent relations at WWE. And the article says that the board's outside counsel was still collecting information about those other NDAs this week, but has determined that the payments totaled in the millions of dollars. Now, the preliminary findings, and again, the key word there is preliminary, are that McMahon used personal funds to pay the former female employees who signed the agreements, including the one involving allegations against Mr. Laurinaitis. The law firm is also assessing WWE's compliance and human resources programs and company culture. Mr. McMahon's attorney, Jerry McDevitt, said that the former paralegal had not made any claims of harassment against McMahon and that WWE did not pay any monies to the ex-employee on her departure. Now, so you know, Triple H, Stephanie, Nick Khan, they are all board members. They are all on the WWE board, but they are not believed to be part of the investigation because obviously that would be a conflict given how close they are to Vince. But the article goes on to say board members learned of the $3 million agreement in a series of anonymous emails they received from someone who said the former paralegal was a friend. The first email sent to the board on March 30th alleged that Mr. McMahon, 76 years old, initially hired the woman at a salary of $100,000 but increased it to $200,000 after beginning a sexual relationship with her. The email to the board also alleged that McMahon gave her like a toy to Mr. Laurinaitis. My friend was so scared she quit after Vince McMahon and lawyer Jerry paid her millions of dollars to shut up. The initial email to the board said, referring to McMahon's longtime lawyer, Mr. McDevitt, who negotiated the deal. The directors received a copy of the agreement from one of McMahon's lawyers on Sunday. That would have been a week ago today. The non-disclosure agreement provided an upfront payment of $1 million to the former employee, with the remaining $2 million to be doled out over a period of 5 years. The former employee, 41 years old, had fallen on hard times before joining the company and spoke of needing extra money, said people who spoke with her while she worked at WWE. She said she had a law degree but had never taken the bar exam, telling colleagues that her career got sidetracked while she tended to a sick parent. The former employee moved from the legal department in 2021 to become an assistant to Mr. Laurinaitis. In recent days, the investigators learned of the other non-disclosure agreements involving allegations against both men. So, that was the initial story. And when you have a story like that drops in a publication like the Wall Street Journal, not exactly the kind of PR that a company wants to see. And regardless of what you think, what's going on in his personal life and all that, this is serious shit. This is serious shit because it involves the company, it involves company employees. Vince McMahon cheating on his wife, that alone is hardly headline news. He has admitted to this before, going back to the Playboy interview that he did over 20 years ago. And his appearance on Howard Stern. He said he would chase after anything in a skirt. But when he was on Pat McAfee's show back before WrestleMania a few months ago, people noticed that he wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Even though he and Linda, they've been married for almost 60 years. And when he was talking about Linda in the interview, he was telling stories about when he was in school. He referred to her as my wife at the time, before he caught himself. And a lot of people took notice of that. You kind of get the sense that they might be married, but they may not exactly be together. Those are two different things. But it's also not the first time that he's been accused of misconduct. And I covered, everybody was bringing it up this week. All of a sudden, this is being dug up again. But I covered the Rita Chatterton story on the podcast many years ago. She was the first female referee in WWE. She later accused him of raping her in the back of his limousine in 1986. Even though it wasn't until 1992 that she came forward publicly and said that. There was also an incident at a tanning salon in 2006 where a 22-year-old worker accused him of sexual assault, and police found probable cause to charge him, but the state attorney's office declined to prosecute because there were no witnesses and there was no physical evidence. It was effectively her word against his. But the woman claimed that before the alleged assault took place that day, he handed her his phone for her to take a picture of him so that he could send it to his girlfriend in New York. So again, it's hardly a surprise to hear that Vince is a cheat or that he's a sleaze. I feel like he and Linda have that Bill and Hillary Clinton thing going on, where it's more a marriage of convenience than anything else. Now, if he had a consensual relationship with someone, you may not care about that. You may say, well, it's consensual, so what's the big deal? You might not care about that, but the board probably will. And sponsors might. And that's the issue here, especially if they find multiple instances of this. A lot of people have fallen for far less. They get caught once and they're out. If they're going back in the archives here and they're finding time after time after time that there's a recurring pattern of this happening, yes, that is a major, major problem. Even if it never went beyond consensual as the CEO of the company, you cannot be sleeping around with your employees. I know it happens all the time, but that does not make it right. It's fucked up. And it's totally unprofessional. And if you cannot see why that is wrong, if you still cannot see, if your brain cannot process, well, what's so wrong about that, then I sure hope you never run your own business. That's why companies have codes of conduct against this sort of thing. And by the way, that word consensual has been thrown around a lot over these past few days. We don't actually know what was consensual and what wasn't. WWE says that it was consensual. Excuse me if I don't take their word for it. I think I'll wait to see what the investigation finds. They have an independent law firm looking into things. I would rather wait and hear what they have to say about that. Anyone who claims that it must have been consensual because she took the money and signed the agreement, they don't know how these things fucking work. We've only heard from one side so far. And we may never hear from the other side because she signed the NDA. But on Friday morning, things escalated quickly. When WWE made the announcement that a special committee of its board is conducting an investigation, which, we already knew, and they explained this whole situation again. But the real news that came out on Friday morning was that effective immediately, Vince McMahon has voluntarily stepped back from his responsibilities as CEO and chairman of the board until the conclusion of the investigation. McMahon will retain his role and responsibilities related to WWE's creative content during this period and remains committed to cooperating with the review underway. The committee has appointed Stephanie McMahon to serve as the interim CEO and interim chairwoman, and they included the following quote from Vince in the press release. I have pledged my complete cooperation to the investigation by the special committee, and I will do everything possible to support the investigation. I have also pledged to accept the findings and outcome of the investigation, whatever they are. I find it absolutely hilarious that Stephanie McMahon, who they buried on her way out as not being very good at her job, and who stepped away to spend more time with her family, is now the interim head of the entire company. And this all happens in the span of just a few weeks. Unbelievable. WWE then announced on Friday that Mr. McMahon would be appearing that night on Smackdown, because of course he would. May as well use it to pop a rating, right? That's probably the first thought that crossed his mind. Backstage, you would never know that anything was wrong. He was said to be joking around in the production meeting. He was said to be in a very jovial mood. putting on a brave face, no selling everything. He walked out at the top of the show to No Chance in Hell. Very appropriate song given what I think he was trying to convey here. He got a standing ovation. There were boos. You could hear boos, but they were drowned out by all the cheers and people sang his song. He said it was a privilege to stand in front of the WWE Universe. He reminded the audience of the WWE signature at the beginning of every show. Then, now, forever, together. Emphasizing the word together. That emphasis on the word together was to show, hey, we're all in this together. They're coming after us. We are going to be okay. It's all mind manipulation. Then he welcomed the crowd to Smackdown, they played his music, and he left. They promoted this all day on their social media, and it ended up being absolutely nothing. He said absolutely nothing. They posted the segment on their YouTube channel. They disabled the ability to post comments. He really didn't have to say a thing. Just by him strutting down to the ring, it was very clear why he did what he did. And what the message was that was being sent. He had one goal with that appearance. And I'm sure his lawyer, I'm sure Jerry said, keep your fucking mouth shut. And so he maybe would have loved to have said some stuff, but he thought better of it. But he didn't have to say a word. He had one goal with that appearance. It was about making it very clear that no matter who they say is running WWE, no matter who they say is the CEO of WWE on paper, Vince McMahon is the one and only true CEO and the one and only true leader of that company. This was a giant fuck you to everyone who thinks that this is going to be what takes him down. And to everybody who is already tap dancing on his grave. The stories of my death are greatly exaggerated. That's what this was. You know, people are letting their imaginations run wild that this is going to spell the end of Vince McMahon and this is going to usher in some kind of new era in WWE. You can never rule anything out because we don't know what the other things... we have no idea what other things the board is going to find in this investigation. How many years does this go back? But I think that when all is said and done, the balance of power, I just feel like it's going to be exactly what it has always been. Vince McMahon at the helm. Vince McMahon in the driver's seat, in power. He still wields tremendous power. His stock shares have 10 times the voting power of the shares that the regular investors have. He doesn't even own 40% of the stock, yet he owns 80% of the stock voting power, the way things are set up. Now, there could be pressure put upon him to step down for the good of the company, depending on what the findings are. It's possible, if things get worse, that he could see the writing on the wall and he could step down voluntarily, but he is, by all accounts, he is a very stubborn SOB. I don't see him going quietly into the night. What would he even do with himself? I can't even imagine if he had to step aside, what would he even do with the rest of his life? This is all he's ever known. And you know how much he likes a good fight. He's told us that over the years. I don't see him going quietly into the night. It would have to be, I mean, the stuff that would come out would have to be really, really just awful for him to finally accept this is the end. But putting aside what I think of his creative track record in recent years, and it isn't pretty. It's pretty fucking ugly. You know, the other night when I touched on this on the Smackdown stream, I said, look at what this man has accomplished in his career. You've got to give him credit for that. You know, it was 40 years ago this year, I believe, that he bought his father's stock or whatever. He took over WWE from his dad. And within a few years, you know, he took it national and he grew it to heights that they had never seen before. You know, the company had done very well in the Northeast and running Madison Square Garden, and they were still a powerhouse, you know, in that part of the country, but he took it to a whole other level, obviously wiped out or sped up the demise of a lot of the existing promotions and a lot of the existing territories throughout the country. He outlasted everybody. He stepped on a lot of necks along the way, but he survived. They didn't. They're gone. He's still here. And you look at where that company was back then in the 80s compared to where that company is today, where it is $1 billion company. If this company sells in the next few years, and I believe it will, it's going to sell for $4, $5, $6, $7 billion. They have guaranteed money coming out of every fucking orifice. They have Saudi Arabia money coming in. They have television money coming in. They have the Peacock deal. All these things that he's done. Even the idea of the WWE network that he started where he cannibalized his own pay-per-view business. And what he ended up doing was taking it and selling it off to NBC Universal for $1 billion. And now it doesn't even matter. People talk about pay-per-views and Money in the Bank is coming up and they pulled Roman Reigns from the show. Well, they don't give a shit. They don't care. Because it doesn't matter. It's not about pay-per-view buy rates anymore. That's not the way the company works. They get paid all the same no matter what's on that pay-per-view. What a great position to be in. It's every promoter's wet dream. It doesn't matter whether your product is great or whether your product sucks. Because you get paid all the same. That's what he has grown this company into. It's basically foolproof. And they're making more money now than they ever have before. So that was under his leadership. That was under his vision. I became a wrestling fan. I was watching WWF. I grew up in New York. I grew up in the Northeast. What was it? It was Hulk Hogan and the Macho Man and Andre the Giant and the $1 Million Man and Jake the Snake. And that's what I grew up on. And those were great times. I have a lot of great memories over the years as being a wrestling fan, as being a WWE fan. There's the good moments and there's the bad moments. But all of that was under his vision. And so, yes, I give him all the credit in the world for that. And I acknowledge that he is, and this cannot even be debated, he is the greatest and most successful wrestling promoter in the history of the business. It's not even debatable. That is Vince McMahon. Here we are now in 2022, and we're hearing about all this stuff, and the key from that initial announcement was that he is going to retain his position in creative power in this company, and I kind of slinked back into my chair when I read that, because one thing that I know a lot of us, myself included, have been hoping for now for many years is that we could get a new creative vision in this company. We can get new blood, we can get some kind of new vision creatively to make WWE television better, to make it more fun, to make it more must-see, where you feel like I can't afford to miss any of the shows. I can't afford to miss Monday, I can't afford to miss Friday because I don't know what's going to happen. The stories are engaging. They're creating new stars. All of these things. I mean, it is as bad as I can remember it being in a lot of ways. Not everything on WWE television sucks, but my God, you look at the product overall. You look at what we have gotten over these past few years. You look at Smackdown now every single week. You look at Raw on most weeks. A couple of guys go down due to injury. Look at where we are now. Back to Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. I'll talk about that later. We just found out that's the SummerSlam main event. Right back to that. One guy goes down due to injury, and here we are. Right? All of this stuff, I can go on and on about the creative troubles in this company, but it all falls under one person. This is Vince McMahon's vision. He is the one who oversees all of that. He is 76 years old. And it is time, I believe, to get someone new, whether it's one person, whether it's trial by committee, whatever it might be. That is the biggest issue plaguing this company right now, despite all the money that they're making. Their television could be so much better. Their product could be so much better. But they don't care. They just say, well, we're making money regardless, so we'll do what Vince wants to do. It's his company, it's his play toy, and whatever entertains him, whatever tickles him, that's what we're going to get on TV. And what I would hope for is some actual real creative change. If people at the top change, if Stephanie McMahon, now she's the CEO, but Vince is still empowered creatively, nothing changes. Absolutely nothing changes. With him still around, he's going to be at the arenas every week. He's still going to be in charge of creative. He's still going to be at the tower working out of his office. Nothing is really changing. This is all just window dressing. And as far as why Stephanie? Why not somebody else? Why Stephanie and not Nick Khan, for example? Or someone else? Because her last name is McMahon. That's why. Her last name is McMahon. It helps that she's a female, given the allegations against the leader of this company. It certainly doesn't hurt to have a woman in this position, right? I'm sure that went into their thinking as well. Instead of Shane or Paul Levesque or Nick Khan, Stephanie. This will make us look good. given some of the salacious shit that's been said. But her last name, more than anything else, is because her last name is McMahon. That is why they wanted to keep a McMahon in charge of things until this whole thing blows over. And when it does, Vince is likely going to be right back as the chairman and the CEO. The wild card being what else they might turn up in this investigation. We know that there are lots of other non-disclosure agreements that go back many years that they wanted to keep hush-hush. Were there other payoffs? It seems like there were. If so, what were the nature of those payoffs? Did they come from company funds? Did they come from Vince's personal funds? Why would there be a need to have all of these secret NDAs? What happened that they felt they needed to keep all of these women quiet and buy their silence? It's a very bad look for the boss of the company paying millions of dollars to women to keep their mouths shut after they leave the company. He claims he will accept the findings of the board, whatever they might be. He did not say anything in that press release, in that quote, about accepting their recommendations. If they recommend that he step down, will he go quietly? He didn't say that. That's the question. Even if he does, this all applies to his role as chairman and CEO. So everybody hoping that he steps down so that maybe the TV improves, I would pump the brakes and not get my hopes up too much on that. What I would love to know, and we may never get the answer, we may never find out, I would love to know who, if anybody, on that board. It's always possible that someone on the board talked to somebody else and that person went and leaked it, but let's assume you got 12 members, I believe, on that board of directors. Who, if anybody, on that board leaked this to the Wall Street Journal? Somebody wanted this out there. So who leaked it? There's all sorts of conspiracy theories about it being a member of Vince's own family because Triple H and Stephanie are on the board. Stephanie's the one in charge now. Supposedly. I don't think she's really in charge of anything. But when did she find out about all this? She had to know. Clearly she knew about this before she announced that she was stepping away and taking a leave of absence. The timing is very interesting. Very, very interesting. What role might all of this have played in her wanting to step back? And then the public burial of her after she left, only for her to be back a few weeks later. Again, we may never find out who leaked it. I just have this image in my head of like Nick Khan as Deep Throat, standing in the dark corner of the parking garage at Titan Tower. He's taking a drag of his cigarette, handing off a file folder to one of the reporters, and then disappearing off into the darkness. As far as what happens to Johnny Ace, because his name has come up in this whole thing, it's not just Vince, it's old Johnny Ace. If anybody is going to fall on their sword, it's going to be Super Dave Osborne. Laurinaitis is a corporate stooge. He's one of Vince's yes men. That's why they brought him back in the role of talent relations head last year when they fired Mark Carrano for Trashbag Gate. They needed a scapegoat for that. He was the fall guy. Laurinaitis will be the fall guy too if needed. If need be, that's why he's in the position he's in. If anybody goes down, he goes down first. And you know what? He should. Because he's a fucking relic who doesn't belong in a position of power. Shouldn't even be there in the first place. And if Laurinaitis goes away, business, that doesn't skip a beat, right? Business as usual. But if Vince McMahon were to go away for good, if he were to step aside for good, it's like an earthquake hitting the company. WWE is Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon is WWE. The two of them are intertwined. But Jerry McDevitt, he's gotten Vinnie Mac out of a lot of jams over the years. He and Vince go way back. He started working with them in 1987. There was an incident on an airplane with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. That was the very first case he ever litigated for them, and ever since then, it's been a wonderful friendship. If this is the worst of it, and this investigation does not turn up anything significant, I find it hard to believe that this, of everything over the years, that this is what finally is going to end up doing this guy in. But make no mistake, this is the greatest jeopardy that Vince McMahon has ever been in since the steroid trial in 1994. Now that was different. That was a criminal matter, and he could have gone to prison. But as far as him running the company day to day, this is the greatest threat that he has ever faced in almost 30 years. There have been CEOs of big corporations that have fallen for similar things. Jeff Zucker, I mentioned him the other night. Jeff Zucker resigned as the president of CNN for failing to disclose a relationship that he was having with another executive who worked there. I think it was a matter of forgetting to mention it on an application maybe or something, and that's what sunk him. McDonald's had a CEO a few years ago who got fired over a consensual relationship that he had with another employee because it violated company policy. If what Vince did violated company policy, then he's in real trouble. All because he couldn't keep his dick in his pants.